Barton, our president, to kick off this wonderful presentation on cranes.
Yes, hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us for one of our regular monthly meetings. It's always a pleasure to have you. This evening, our speaker will be Matt Fong, who's the Director of Fundraising and Outreach of the Crane Trust, which purchases and manages and restores habitat for whooping and sandhill cranes and other migratory birds, primarily in the Big Bend area of Platte River, Nebraska. He's going to tell us all about it. Take it away, Matt.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. As mentioned before, my name is Matt Fong. I am joining you here from central Nebraska. So it's 9:02 p.m. So well past my traditional bedtime here, but I'm so happy to be with you. We actually just finished our what we call kind of crane season. And so the sandhill cranes and whooping cranes migrate through central Nebraska each year, and we predominantly host all of our events just during the month of March. And so we have kind of a layer, a series of ways that people can come in and see and experience the cranes. And so we at the end of March waved goodbye to all of our guests and promptly all took a nap. And so it's been nice to kind of have some time to recuperate and reflect on how wonderful our crane season was. I'm going to share my screen here. I have a little 2.5-hour presentation for you. That was a joke, by the way. But I did just want to share a little information about who we are as the Crane Trust and why we focus our work on preserving habitat for the sandhill cranes and whooping cranes during their migration. So again, thank you. I'm not actually sure who had the contact for us or who reached out. I know that this has been on my calendar for quite some time, so good job being and scheduling your programs well in advance. I hope that means somebody's had some familiarity with the Crane Trust or been out to see the sandhill cranes and whooping cranes in central Nebraska. I will share with you through my presentation here a few opportunities if you ever have an interest in coming out to see the Super Bowl of cranes at some point in the future. So this is the photo that I have up on the screen here is our headquarters buildings. We actually have two facilities. So we have our headquarters here, which is the original location for the Crane Trust. And then we also have a visitor center, which is right along Interstate 80, which Patricia and I were just visiting about, that just jogs all the way through central Nebraska. And it's a nice place for people to conveniently stop, learn a little bit more about the Central Platte River Valley, as well as see the cranes and learn about the cranes during crane season, but it's also a really nice restroom stop for folks on the interstate as well. So we try to hook people in their time of need here. Ooh, good question already. Look at you all. I haven't even started. And a question here from Sarah. Is the bird flu a concern in terms of safety of the cranes and visitors when coming to see the migration? Good question. We have a science team, I'll detail that here in just a little bit, that works with lots of other conservation partners throughout the US, but then also throughout the world to monitor any of those concerns about bird flu or any other issues that might affect the cranes. We have been really fortunate. Again, we have been monitoring that over the course of the last several years. We have not seen a significant number of cranes that have been affected by bird flu over the course of the last 2 or 3 years. That has been a more prevalent concern throughout the world. And so we've been really fortunate that that has not been the case. As you think about, millions of cranes coming together, that is a concern. that perhaps this would be the time that you could have a devastating situation where, you know, approximately 80% of the world's population of one species is together. And so sharing some sort of disease like that could be really devastating. But again, we've been really fortunate, have not seen that. Cranes generally are very healthy species, and so have persisted and navigated a lot of those health issues throughout the generations. And so so we hope that that continues, but our science team continues to monitor that.
Matt, if I may interject for just a
Yeah.
second. I think what we will do so that your concentration is not interrupted is that people can go ahead and post their questions on
Yeah.
chat, and we'll get to them at the end, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, that's quite fine. And I will be pleased to take any of your questions at the end. So to write them down or send them in the chat, I'll be happy to follow up on any of those. So so again, delighted to be with you. What I thought maybe I'd do here to start is, hey, who am I? So I am here, Director of Fundraising and Outreach for the Crane Trust. I have worked for the Crane Trust this is my 3rd year. You can tell here, this is my lovely wife, Kalina, and our delightful 12-year-old daughter, Vivian is her name. And so right before crane season, so this was in February, we had really phenomenal numbers of cranes that came early this year. And so, so Bryce, our president and CEO, you know, we didn't have people booked into the blinds in February, said, hey, if any families want to come out or any special friends that are local, you want to come out and see the cranes prior to kind of our kickoff to our crane season, he let us all kind of have full opportunity to come out. So this was a picture of us in the blinds back in February. As I was mentioning earlier, as we were kind of getting things settled here, I have always lived along the Central Platte River Valley in Nebraska. And so I grew up about an hour and a half west of where I live now on a farm. And so know and recognize and appreciate the Central Platte River Valley and the habitat that it provides, and recognize how really important it is, not only for wildlife, but you know, as irrigation and water supply for you know, the Nebraska, Colorado, Missouri. It's a really important river and river ecosystem. I was also mentioning before, I think it's really interesting how kind of your life comes together. I really developed my love of birds from my grandmother. So I vividly remember sitting around my grandma's kitchen table when I was quite young, looking out, you know, with my tiny little binoculars and watching goldfinches or watching house finches come through on the farm. And so I feel like I've always had an interest and passion for birds. So I again have worked for the Crane Trust now for 3 years, but my previous experience was working in higher ed. And so I ran our alumni office for a small private liberal arts college here in central Nebraska, and always did fundraising, always did marketing and communication related work. And so it's so interesting how all of the little pieces of your life kind of come together and you go, oh, this all fits together just perfectly with interests and experience. And so it's been really fun to work for the trust and get to represent the Crane Trust with good people like you who have a lot of interest. So you did not join this call tonight to learn more about me, and so let's talk a little bit about cranes. So again, I hope some of you have had the opportunity to see cranes previously. I thought I'd give just a little overview about Sandhill Cranes and whooping cranes here to start. This is a little short video. I think it's just like 2 minutes, but I thought that this was kind of a great way to kind of focus our attention with the beauty and kind of sounds of the cranes as we get started here. So I think that that's kind of a nice way to kind of center our talk and discussion here this evening. The call and sound of cranes, I think, is so distinctive, and so many people have commented on the sound of them and being able to, you can hear them from so far away, and so it's so distinctive to be able to hear them, and so I kind of think of them as their call as a bugling trumpet. And so again, you can hear them from a long ways away. Again, just a quick little overview of who we are as the Crane Trust. Our mission is to protect and maintain the physical, hydrological, and biological integrity of the Big Bend area of the Platte River so that it continues to function as a life support system for whooping cranes, sandhill cranes, and other migratory bird species. And we carry out our mission in three really important ways. And so we do that in scientific research, land management, and outreach and education. And so again, I'll detail a little bit of our work in all of those areas here as we continue. The trust was actually formed in 1978. And so it was actually formed as a result of a lawsuit. And so the National Wildlife Federation and the state of Nebraska actually came together and recognized that a dam was being built in Wyoming that was going to restrict water flows for the Platte River. So you can see that lovely picture, I hope you can see it at least, of the Platte River. And so restrict water flows that would affect the endangered species, which is the whooping crane. And so again, the whooping crane is an endangered species and has been, and I'll detail a little bit more about whooping cranes here in a minute. But how important this habitat in central Nebraska is for their migration. The Crane Trust either owns or manages approximately 10,000 acres right here along the Central Platte River. And as I was mentioning before, we have a visitor center which we acquired in 2012, which is really our front door for visitors to see and experience cranes and learn a little bit more about the work that we do. And so again, little history for you of the Crane Trust. So Central Platte River Valley, you can see here in this map, and so you can see where I am, this star right here in the middle of the US is really the pinch point of the hourglass. And so during migration, we see over 1 million sandhill cranes, over 500 whooping cranes, and literally millions of migrating snow geese, ducks, and songbirds throughout the spring. And so you can see in this map itself, approximately 80% of the world's population of sandhill cranes migrate through this pinch point of the hourglass here in the map. So there are other populations of sandhill cranes. You can see a few of them detailed here in the map. There's this Rocky Mountain flyway. There are a couple of smaller flyways that are noted here in California. I hope that means some of you have seen cranes where you are. And then there's also a couple of eastern flyways as well. But again, this mid-continent flyway is vast and large. And so you can see cranes winter here in New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas, and in northern Mexico, and then go to their nesting grounds here. And so some of them can travel all the way across the Bering Strait into Alaska, all through Canada. Some actually go even as far as Siberia into to Russia. And so it's really phenomenal to see all of those cranes again come through this pinch point of the hourglass. So again, let's talk a little bit more about sandhill cranes in particular. So a few sandhill crane facts. This is a beautiful photo of a beautiful sandhill crane. Sandhill cranes stand about 3 to 5 feet tall. Their wingspan is 5 to 6 feet wide. Their weight, they can weigh somewhere between 6.5 to 14 pounds. They generally lay 1 or 2 eggs. Usually only one of their eggs is successful, so they usually only have 1 young per year. This was interesting for me. Again, as you probably noted in my presentation or notes about myself earlier, I was a business major, and so I was not a scientist and did not study birds during my time in college. But cranes generally mate for life, and so I learned during my time at the Crane Trust through our scientists, birds that look male and female pairs alike generally mate for life. And so cardinals, being so different, males versus females, don't mate for life. But sandhill cranes, it's really virtually impossible to tell the difference between a male and a female sandhill crane, and so they're much more likely to mate for life. They can live up to 20 years in the wild. Into captivity, they can live to be much older, 60 and 70. I think that there was one crane that was documented to be at least 70 years old into captivity. So they can be one old bird, that's for sure. Young cranes are called colts, adult females are called mares, and adult males are called roans. So all kind of interesting notes there about sandhill cranes. And there are, in fact, two subspecies that we see here in the Central Platte River Valley that converge. So graders and lesser sandhill cranes. So the population of lesser sandhill cranes is a bit larger, so about 60% of that population are the somewhat smaller sandhill cranes. They have the longest proportional wingspan over the greater. So the lessers are the ones that migrate further. And so those are the ones that generally can travel as far as Siberia. And so then the graders, which stand just slightly taller, are about 40% of the population. Where the Crane Trust is in the river valley, we actually see the majority of the cranes in our section of the river are actually the graders. And so we see predominantly those that are just a little bit taller. A few other sandhill crane facts. They do a lot of staging in the Platte River Valley. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we call our crane season just the month of March, but really cranes begin arriving. We call it from Valentine's Day to Tax Day. So February, March, and April is their spring migration. And so an individual crane will usually be in the Central Platte River Valley from somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks. And so they're here during their migration to rest and replenish. And so replenish their energy so that they are successful as they traverse to their nesting grounds in Canada and Alaska. The Platte River is really the only major staging grounds during their northward migration. And so they will stop generally overnight in other places, but not for any period or length of time. And so again, the Central Platte River Valley is the one place that they stop to feed and feast and get themselves ready for the rest of their journey and to be successful in their nesting coming up. So again, approximately 80% of the world's population of sandhill cranes come through the Central Platte River Valley. So during their time here, they really have a mixed diet that is essential for them for their reproduction and survivals. So they roost in the river overnight, and they do that instinctively for safety. And so then during the day, they are out in our cornfields and soybean fields and wheat fields and meadows near the river. And so they're feasting during the day. So about 95% of their diet really is waste grain. So a lot of that is corn. I'm sure you all have heard this, that corn is king for us here in Nebraska. So lots of farmers plant lots of corn. And so they do eat a lot of that waste grain that spills during harvest in the fall. And so they're doing a lot of cleanup. A lot of people actually ask us if there are any issues with the cranes and farmers. And so, no, not really. So it's really still, even here on April 25th, it's still really too early to plant here. And so there's no reason that farmers would really be out in the field in March planting, because the corn would still be too cold and would not grow and could very well easily freeze. And so there's really no kind of battle between the cranes and or farmers. And so, so it's kind of a nice, really natural working relationship. The cranes provide a little extra fertilizer when they're out in the fields, and do a lot of cleanup that really is beneficial for the farmers. And so they're cleaning up last year's corn and making sure then that that their fields are clean for the year ahead. They also, during their time here, they can not only survive on corn or waste grains, they also eat a lot of invertebrates and plant tubers, and they need the, calcium and those type of things from those other essential nutrients to make sure that they're successful for their eggs. And so during their time here, again, 2 to 4 weeks, they're working to increase their body weight by between 15 to 20% during their time. So again, it's a really important and essential stopover for them. I kind of mentioned this before, but again, they roost in the river overnight. They do that instinctively for safety. And so in the late afternoons, they gather in the open fields that are adjacent to the river. And so they kind of collectively get a little closer as the sun gets closer to going down to the river, and then fly into the river really at dusk. And so as you noted earlier, the Platte River, I'll show you that photo again, is really wide and shallow here in this photo. You can tell that. And so cranes like to stand in water. And so they don't swim, so they don't have webbed feet, so they don't swim, and so they want to stand in somewhere between 1 inch to 6 inches of water. And so they don't want their bellies to get wet, but again, they want to be in water to ensure that they're safe from predators. And so the watercolor covers the shallow sandbars, and again, those are the areas that they feel safest. In any single roost, each night is a little different, but there can be somewhere between 10, 50, or even up to 100,000 cranes in one roost on the river. And again, they do that instinctively for safety. The predators for us here in central Nebraska would be coyotes. Sometimes raccoons can also be a little aggressive, but really coyotes are probably the main predator. In the mornings, often we see some kind of tormenting behavior from bald eagles as well. And so bald eagles will come dive bomb the roost to see if they can identify either a weak or an injured crane. And so those are kind of the main predators for them here in Nebraska. The Crane Trust, again, I mentioned we have a science team. We coordinate a weekly flight where we do a visual estimate of the cranes each week. I hope some of you may have been connected to us either in social media or get some of our emails. So we send out an update each week on what those crane count numbers are. And so again, we start mid-February and do a weekly flight over the 80-mile stretch of the river from Chapman, Nebraska to Overton, Nebraska. That doesn't mean anything to you all, I'm sure. But again, we do aerial estimates. So 2 of our science team members are up there. They photograph the roost. They count the cranes in the photos when they get back, but then they also do kind of visual estimates. So if they can guess kind of the density, depending on the weather temperature, will dictate how either closely packed they are together if it's colder, or if it's a little warmer, they won't be quite so snug in their roost. You can kind of get a visual estimate of how many cranes. If this is 10 cranes, 50, 100, this would be 500, 1,000, and so do some estimates in that way. And so it's a really helpful tool. We've been doing those counts for over 20 years and have seen some really interesting trends for cranes. This is our count. You can see this graph here. for 2024. So 2024 is the blue line here at the top. 2023 is the orange line here in the middle. And 2016, which was also a kind of a remarkable year for us, is noted here in the darker orange. But you can see this number here for 2024 this year. You can see we had a really kind of nice big growth of cranes throughout the migration season. And we actually had and kept cranes here for a really long time. So we call this a prolonged peak. You can see really from week 4, we had over 300,000, and then we had, 300,000 again in week 8. And so lots of cranes in the Central Platte River Valley. Week 9, you can see that there was a big dip down to 50,000. And then we did do a week 10 count, and they counted 0 Sandhill Cranes on week 10. So they estimated just a few is their official count. So interesting information. Lots of people have interest in this, and a lot of that is dictated a lot by weather patterns. And so this year our weather was really favorable for folks to see and experience lots of cranes. So now I'm going to transition just a little bit to talking about whooping cranes. And so a few facts here about whooping cranes. It is the tallest bird in North America. It does stand about 5 feet tall, has a wingspan of 7 to 8 feet, weighs somewhere between 14 and 17 pounds. Again, 1 to 2 eggs. They do mate for life and have a little bit longer lifespan of 20 to 25 years. Whooping cranes are one of the scarcest birds on the planet. So we see here in central Nebraska, of the 15 species of cranes in the world, we see the most numerous being the sandhill crane, and also the rarest, the whooping crane. And so we have written accounts of whooping cranes being documented all the way back to 1840. However, in 1941, there were fewer than 20 birds that remained in the world population. They are, again, as I mentioned before, protected under the Endangered Species Act. The International Crane Foundation provides the official number of cranes in the world migratory flock. There are 543. There are 145 in captivity. And just this year, our science team documented 175 of those endangered whooping cranes had been documented in the Central Platte River Valley. So really reinforces how important our habitat is for whooping cranes in particular. One thing I'll highlight here, this was a really unique experience for us. If you were to count in this photo, there are 41 whooping cranes just in this one photo. And if our lens was a little bit wider, there were actually 46 that were right here at this one time. And so this was right outside of one of our blinds in the fall. So to see all of those cranes together, this was the largest number of migratory cranes, whooping cranes that had ever been documented. And so again, seeing all of them here in central Nebraska reinforces how important our work really is. And so, as I mentioned before, we do our work in science and research. So our science and research really works to identify what's working, what's not. We have kind of a full habitat, holistic view. And so we do look at all users of the ecosystem. So while our work is primarily focused on sandhill cranes and whooping cranes, we know if we're doing our work right for them, it benefits lots of other species as well. Our science and research team has 4 full-time staff members and a series of seasonals that help out with a lot of our summer research and summer surveys. You can see in this photo, they're doing some prairie plot surveys here to document number of prairie species in this section of the prairie. A few examples of some of our science and research work that we do each year. This past year, we did a moth survey, so surveying the different types of moths and moths as pollinators, avians, anurans, vegetation surveys, small mammal surveys, and you can see here in this photo what our science team calls fishy Fridays, and so they actually go out and seine in the Platte River to identify prevalence and different types of fish species in the river. So again, really important research work to kind of gauge fully the health and wellness of the habitat. And so our land management team then is guided by the work that our science and research does. So I'll show this. This is just a little sped up video here. So you can see this is actually a tractor, 2 tractors out on the river. So this is actually during the summer, late summer. And so the river was dry. So our river does go dry in dry years. And so I'll play that again. But our land management team goes out and does disking when we can. And so if the river's dry, our team can go knock down some of those. A lot of what is there is invasive species. So knock those down to ensure that the river doesn't become channelized, and so continues to stay with wide and open braided river channels. And so, so again, really important for us and the cranes to have that type of habitat. So again, human management is needed. So our land management team helps to make sure that we have the most ideal habitat. And so a lot of our work focuses, as I mentioned before, on invasive species for us here. Red cedar is a huge problem for us. Red cedar trees just grow like absolute weeds everywhere and will take over. Phragmites is another invasive grass, and purple loosestrife is another one. So a lot of management work done for those exotic invasive species. So our native restoring habitat work, we do lots of seed collection and seed distribution. We do lots of disking of the river channels. We use grazing to also manage some of the prairie habitat. And then we do some restoration of wetland habitat and sloughs as well. So our land management staff does also have 4 full-time positions and in fact, 1 seasonal person that helps out with us as well. This was actually just yesterday. And so we use prescribed fire. And so we coordinate burns on the prairie to do lots of restoration work. And so the burns take out a lot of those invasive species and then provide lots of nutrients back into the soil from those burns, and then flush back really wonderfully lush prairie grasses after the burns are done. So again, this was just yesterday. They finished this burn, and I just thought this was such a lovely picture. I wanted to share it with you. So as I mentioned, grazing, we have a herd of American bison. And so, so we have used bison for the way that they graze, and so they are the historical grazers on the prairie. And so bison actually graze very differently than cattle. So cattle are very prevalent here in Nebraska, bison less so. So bison actually have really small feet and actually disturb the ground very differently than cattle do. And then the way that they wallow, they also allow some different species of grasses to take hold in those wallows, as opposed to just the flat prairie grasses. So the herd was introduced in 2013. Our 2024 numbers are changing daily. I just checked this morning. We actually have 7 bison calves that have been born over the course of the last 2 weeks. So we have 123 adults, is what I'll say. The 7 calves are not included in those numbers. And so, so again, the bison are really fun to watch, and people love to stop by and see the bison as well. I'm actually going to skip this little video because I'm feeling as though I'm a little rushed for time here. And so we're going to continue on here. Our Nature and Visitor Center, as I mentioned before, is really kind of our hub of activity during the month of March, located right along beautiful Interstate 80. We do have a little gift shop, art gallery, display gallery, hiking trails, a little viewing tower. You can see a small portion of our bison herd, and we have lots of great information for folks to share. These numbers also hot off the press here are our visitor numbers just during the month of March. And so we saw, again, walking through our doors, 35,000 visitors. During the month of March, we offered tours to 2,940 people, and we are open 7 days a week. So March knows no days of the week for us. And so if by chance you would ever love to come see us in March, which I encourage you to do so, we have lots of ways for you to see the cranes. And so there are public tours. So we have 2 viewing blinds that you can just buy a ticket and go into the viewing blinds to see the cranes either first thing in the morning or in the evening. And we also offer footbridge tours. You can just go see the cranes as they're kind of flying over in the sky. We do daytime driving tours. You can see cranes out foraging in the fields. If you are a burgeoning photographer, we do have a photo instructor that offers photo experiences, so both a workshop and tour. She also provides kind of guided instruction on editing and photo-specific blinds. So really of interest for those folks who are connected to photography. And then the program that I run is our VIP program. And so we offer overnight on-site lodging. We have cottages and suites for folks to stay with us. So no need to run to a hotel. You can see this photo is actually in our VIP blinds. So our VIP blinds are heated and have lovely views, so lovely windows. You go out with our scientists and staff. We have a lovely caterer who offers wonderful meals. And so it's a really wonderful program, I'll tell you that. So this is just a quick little overview. Our cottages here are located right here. This is that big headquarters building that I showed in that first slide. Our fancy suites are here in this building. And so you can see you can stay right on site with us. And then the river is right here. And so you're just not far. This is just a picture of what one of the rooms looks like in one of our suites as well. For our members, we also offer virtual crane tours throughout the year. So from February 26th to April 1st, we offer guided tours 5 days a week, both in the morning and in the evening. So we had 4,800 hours watched on our crane cam, 980 unique views, so many chat messages. And our virtual program started during COVID, but has really provided such a great opportunity for us to continue to expand our reach with people far and wide. Education and outreach was the last area, kind of the last leg of our stool. And so if we're doing all of this work in land management and science and research, we got to share it with folks in some way. And so we have tried to provide lots of field trips and educational festivals and workshops to be able to share the information about our work, but then also the interest in the Central Platte River Valley and birds and animals and habitat, and how really important that is for us to get that information out. So you might be thinking, of course, I mentioned before my title was Director of Fundraising and Outreach. So we are a nonprofit, and so we rely on the support of our members and donors to ensure that we can continue to do our work. So flat donations obviously are always appreciated. You can become a member of the Crane Trust for exclusive content and exclusive access. And if nothing else, join our Prairie Pulse e-newsletter. Again, we send out a weekly update during crane season on our crane numbers. After that, we probably send out 5 or 6 emails a year. So we try not to overly burden folks with information about the Crane Trust. All of that is available for you if you have any interest at cranetrust.org/support. Thank you. That's my last slide. And here I see that there's a plethora of chats here. I'll open up the chat box, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have here. So let me scan through these. I've seen cranes in New Mexico areas. Are those en route to your area? Could be. So as I mentioned before, there are several flyways. New Mexico, they might actually be in the Rocky Mountain Flyway. So we have gone out to our friends in Steamboat, Colorado. They have a Yampa Valley Crane Festival. If you've not been, you should go. It's a delightful little festival over Labor Day weekend. And so they see the cranes in the Rocky Mountain Flyway. There's far fewer cranes, so they have a full festival for what seems to be 30 cranes. But it's a really fun festival. They seem really excited about it, and we have encouraged a few folks to come out and see the Crane Trust and the Mid-Continent Flyway through that as well. Any idea what did they eat prior to industrial agriculture? Great question. So they likely ate a lot of what I mentioned in addition. So a lot of tubers and vertebrates, small fish and anurins. And so they're really opportunists. And so they will eat about anything that they can find. And so, you know, if this would have all historically been prairie, they probably would have eaten a lot more of the different things in the wet meadows. The river at that point would have been a mile wide, so there would have been much more kind of wet meadow habitat around as opposed to the cornfields. Please detail on what waste corn is. Thank you for that question. So when farmers are out harvesting in the fall, you know, the big combines and tractors, which are collecting all of the corn from the fields, you know, there's some spillage. And so, so some of that, you know, ends up falling off the side of the combine, getting missed in the tractors. And so the waste corn would just be corn that just fell off or didn't get harvested. What factors led to the near extinction of the whooping cranes? Great question. Whooping crane populations, we don't believe were ever as healthy as the sandhill crane population. And so, so the population was smaller to begin with. It takes them, because again, they only have one young each year, their population rebounds so much slower. And they were also, because they're so big and so beautiful, they were hunted. And so you think about during the early 1900s, 10s, 20s, and the fashions of the time and the beautiful feathers that were so of interest in fashion. So they were often hunted for their feathers. And so again, they were easy to hunt because they were so large. And so, so again, led to such a severe population decline. Is this area in a floodplain? Are spring and fall migration patterns similar? So we are not, my insurance would tell you that I'm not in a floodplain, but it does flood here from time to time if we get rains in the right way. Now, again, we've been in a drought for what seems like the last decade. And so, so there are areas that flood, but a lot of that flooding will take place in the early spring when snow melt is coming down from Colorado. So there can be a larger amount of water coming through the Platte River Valley. And also, if the ground is still frozen during that time, then the water doesn't have any place to go. And so, so that's when we do see some flooding. Spring and fall migrations are so different. And so while cranes are here for 2 to 4 weeks in the spring, they will come back through in the fall. But a lot of times they don't stay. Sometimes we'll just hear them. We'll see them for 1 or 2 days. They don't need to fatten up during their time in the fall because, again, they already nested. They're coming back with their young. And so they're making a beeline back to the south. And so spring and fall migrations are very different. We don't even advertise the fall migration because it would be really hard for people to see cranes. What do you all do outside of crane season? Do you have many other birds there? So we get that question a lot. What do you do? I mean, it's busy in March, but what do you do outside of crane season? So we do a lot of work. And so a lot of that science and research work is done in spring, summer, and fall. A lot of the land management work is done again during warmer times of the year. And so there's a lot of management work that's done during that time. For me, we do a lot of educational and outreach events during outside of crane season. And I'm following up with a lot of grants and donors. And we do have some engagement events that we try to host and coordinate to reinforce and remind people about the Crane Trust. What happens with fall migration? Okay, good. I already answered that question. What regions do most of your members come from? Ooh, that's a good one. We have members from all over. It's crazy. So again, I mentioned I do the VIP program, which is our overnight program, in March. There are so many days in March. So we have space. We have space for approximately 30 people to stay with us. And so there are so many days when we have not one person from Nebraska. And so there are people really from all over. So Minnesota, Colorado, California, Florida, Texas. We had international visitors. We had one gentleman from the Bhutan. We had a couple from Spain. We had several folks from Canada this year. We had a gentleman and his wife that came in from Switzerland the year before. And so we really have people from all over. Do you know what happened to the whooping cranes that people were trying to get to migrate from the Midwest to Florida? Are they still migrating on that route? So that's a hard one. So our friends at the International Crane Foundation have been trying to establish other wild populations of whooping cranes. They have not been overly successful in those endeavors. And so it's been really hard to reestablish populations. The population in Florida, which they were assuming would be a non-migratory population, I think that they're pretty close to giving up on. There's just been a lot of predatory challenges with whooping cranes in Florida. And I think that I was listening to one of their staff members. They come out each March as well, talking about nest mites were a huge issue for them in Florida. And so just the seasonal and environmental challenges with that habitat have been really hard for the whooping cranes to establish in Florida. And so I think that they're pretty close to giving up on that population. There is a more successful non-migratory population in Louisiana that they have had some success with. I think maybe that there's maybe 40 or 50 whooping cranes in that area in Louisiana. So good questions. Anything else? What else did I miss? You told me 20 minutes and I think I went for like 40, so I'm sorry.
We're not sorry. It was wonderful.
Well, I hope I didn't bore you to death.
No,
Oh, how could you? Would you mind stopping share screen?
Oh, yes. Sorry about that.
there we go.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well,
That was, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I really do appreciate the opportunity to visit with you all. It's nice to speak with people who have an interest in birds and wildlife and habitat preservation. And I really do hope if you have an interest, reach out to us. Again, cranetrust.org. My contact information is on the website. We would love to welcome you to Central Nebraska sometime to see the cranes. And so it really is remarkable. So many people have kind of the Sandhill crane migration on their bucket list. And so many people have, it's wonderful for me to share that with people. And so I have commented and just been, I think, really in awe of being able to see the migration together. So come see us sometime. We'd love that.
And we would love to. And thank you, Matt, for that great presentation. And I'm inspired. I mean, I have seen Sandhill Cranes out here in the Central Valley of California. And they are an inspiring and beautiful sight to see. It's just amazing to stand there at sunset and to hear them calling and watch them as they fly into their roosts. It is so. I urge all of you, go out and see them. And thank you again.
You bet. Well, again, feel free to reach out. My contact information is on the website. If you're okay, I will exit and let you continue your evening meeting.
Thank you. I do have a couple of things I want to mention to our members.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
Thank you again.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
for being here so late.
No problem. No problem.
Yes, thanks for staying up with us.
You
Yes.
betcha. No problem. Take care,
Okay.
you all.
Thank you,
Good
Matt.
night.
Yep. Goodbye.